Call to order the Ashland Board of Commissioners meeting for Thursday, December 15, 2022. We'll start with the invocation by Commissioner Goot and Pledge of Allegiance.
For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Lord, we come today, this last meeting of the year, thanking you for the gift of your Son and our Savior, Jesus Christ. And during this Christmas season, let us realize that he alone is the source of our strength and the author of all our accomplishments. Today we are most thankful for our city and its people. We are thankful that you continue to show our city your blessing and favor. Guide this board today as we continue to strive to make the best decisions for our citizens and in the best interest of our city. Bless our city manager, our staff and employees, and those in attendance today, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Let's stand and salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Wertz. We have a motion to receive and file the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to receive and file the minutes for the regular meeting held on November 17, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hearings and reports. Commissioners, if you'll allow me. First off, I want to welcome everybody. It is almost the last meeting, I think, Commissioner Goot, for the year.
Almost.
Almost. It has been a really great year for this city. We have seen a lot of progress. But we've also had some tough losses, and one of those losses I'd like to comment on today. We found out yesterday that we lost a dear member of our park board and friend of the city, Stu Taylor. So we would like to honor him and his service to our city by having this meeting and honor him and closing out that way. Otherwise, I'd like to move on to our commissioners. Commissioner Clark, would you like to start?
Thank you, sir. We have a very lengthy agenda today, so I'll be very quick. One, Merry Christmas to all of you. And it's been an absolute honor serving with you this last year. And I think that our agenda today points to a lot of the progress that we've made, and I'm excited to get into it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Blanton.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say one thing, and you know, this is going to be an exciting meeting where we're going to talk about a lot of different things. And there's a few people here that are here with us today that I want to say thanks to. A lot of the excitement and momentum that has built over the last few years have been because of our citizens and our citizens, citizen creators, people who are taking things on themselves and doing events. You're in our minds when we're making these decisions for some of the stuff you're going to hear today. So we appreciate you. I want to say thanks to past commissions who, you know, all of this doesn't happen overnight. So past commissions, past staff members, you know, our city manager. I mean, he's got a very tough job, you know, in the city and all of the departments. But being able to look forward and see, you know, with our vision and looking forward to what the city can be. It's very important, and that we have someone, and we do that understands that. There's a quote that one of my favorite quotes is that I think about a lot here, but I don't think I've ever recited it here, is, "Blessed are those who plant trees under whose shade they will never sit." Now, these projects, hopefully, we will get to reap, so we'll get to enjoy them too, but
I'm sitting under the tree, Josh.
okay. But the idea here is
You'll be laying under the tree.
these are some decisions that aren't always easy to make, and it takes one group who's forging ahead with, you know, everybody going the same direction, and it's for the greater good, and it's for generations, not this generation, but future generations as well. So thank you to my fellow commissioners for doing that, because it takes courage to make some of these decisions. You know, we've spent a lot of time we've had public meetings, we've had lots of, for the last, year and a half. My wife can probably tell you exactly how long it's been. But it's been awesome. That's why I did this job. It's that public input and having this back and forth, and then having the courage to make these decisions and see something that can change a city. We're the biggest city in Eastern Kentucky, and we're going to act like it. So that's what we're doing today. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Spriggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, first of all, I want to say welcome to everybody. It's good to see a lot of people here today. And yes, I have to agree with Commissioner Blanton that decisions we make are weighty because it affects our citizens. So I really want to thank the citizens of Ashland for re-electing this Board of Commission, arguably the best board I've served with. We call ourselves Commission of Action, and certainly you're going to see the fruition of a lot of that today on this agenda. And also I want to thank, coming 2 years in, all the good work by the employees of the City of Ashland. It takes all of us working together to make things happen, and being on the same page is pretty awesome sometimes. I want to wish everybody out there Merry Christmas, and my fellow commissioners and the mayor and city manager, last but not least, the city manager here, my seatmate. Also, I have one other little thing. I want to say happy birthday to my granddaughter, Ollie. She's 6 today. So happy birthday, Ollie.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Goot.
Everything's pretty much been said, but I agree with everything that everybody said. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward, and I'm determined to have a good 2022. We are going to have a happy new year because we're going to see a lot of these projects either start or come to completion, or 2023, I'm sorry.
We've already had a good
It's
2020.
COVID brain, okay? And, but I'm appreciative of our city manager, of you all, my fellow commissioners, and the staff. Our employees are second to none. And if you just drive down Winchester Avenue and around the city, it's just a joy to be here and see a lot of construction. Our hospital, $80 million construction on the hospital, and things are going forward. And our city is one of the prettiest cities around Christmas time because of the winter wonderland of lights. It's just people come from all over Eastern Kentucky and all over to see this, and I'm a big fan of that. I got no problem with Santa Claus and the reindeer and everything. I was Santa Claus one time, I played Santa Claus in the arcade when my daughter was 4 years old. She's 42 now. And the kids were lined out the door to Winchester Avenue. And she popped up right in the middle of everything and said, "You're not Santa, you're Daddy." And she was always sucked the joy out of her room. Ruined Christmas for a bunch of kids, but today I remember the reason for the season, and I want to say Merry Christmas to all of you.
Hey, I know she's not in here too, but I want to thank Connie for my beautiful birthday flowers. Thank you, Connie.
Connie is truly helpful
Jewel.
to this commission, for sure. I think we've got a flag presentation.
Yes.
All right.
The Pub Chapter of the Daughters of American Revolution, we love our American flags. We've already presented one to the city that's in the hallway, but we're always scouting around, and one of the Pogue Daughters spotted the one down at the riverfront, but with the suggestion of the city manager, we're donating a flag, if you could stand, donating a flag to the city that will fly on City Hall, at the top of City Hall. So Old Glory and all it stands for, our freedoms and liberty, will soar high above, in the sky above our City Hall.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome very
Commissioner.
much.
All right. City manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go ahead and go a little bit out of sequence. We'd like to start because the two presenters both unfortunately have to have other meetings after today's schedule. So I'd like to start with the Winchester Avenue Street Improvement and Streetscaping Project. Mr. Stephen Sewell from Palmer Engineering is going to present today. I'd also like to recognize Terry Sicking from Kiowa. She's been a really big a part of a lot of funding that you all will hear today that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. And Terry, thanks for coming here today.
So I didn't know what to do. I didn't come to a meeting with at least some kind of map.
That's good.
Even though everything's up here, at least we'll have this, and then if people want to look at it after the meeting, at least I'll leave it here for everybody to look at. So today, what we're going to talk about is, my name's Stephen Sewell with Palmer Engineering. I know I've met a lot of you all throughout this last year and a half that we've been working on the Winchester Avenue improvements. So this is kind of an update to where we are and where we're going. So we'll talk about some updates to the intersections along Winchester Avenue. We will update about some loading zones. That was something we heard during our meetings with the business owners and the public, was how we were going to deal with loading and getting their deliveries downtown. Do a little update on the project status, where we stand on plan development and the streetscape development project, and then where our funding opportunities are, and then future steps. So we started with this statement back in our planning study that we did, the feasibility study that we did, that the goal of converting Winchester Avenue from 4 lanes down to 2, and what the impacts would be on Greenup Avenue. But at that same time, we also had a project that was looking at streetscaping from 7th all the way to 22nd. So those were kind of running together, and now we've combined those into one project. So there'll be streetscaping from 7th to 13th, and then from 13th to 18th is the more, I'll call it more improvement project, roadway projects, and changing from 4 lanes down to 2, and then more streetscaping from 18th down to 22nd. But the benefit of those, and what we heard from you all and the people, and where we were going with this, was we wanted to calm traffic through this segment. We wanted to improve safety for all users, increase the walkability, and if we do those things, then downtown is going to, the revitalization of downtown will happen, along with increase in tourism and folks that are coming to this area. So I mentioned that we've kind of I've broken this project, I guess I'll say. It's one project. I've segmented it into 3 segments. You'll see the top slide there, segment 1. It's not doing any roadway improvements. All it is fixing sidewalks, curbs, adding some landscaping, some trees, some street lamps, things like that. The same thing on segment 3. It's going to be from 18th to 22nd, is doing those same things. And as part of this, I will say that we've been working very closely with the Transportation Cabinet and with Kiowa all the way through this whole entire process. They've been great to work with. The city, I think, would confirm that also and amplify that. Everything has been just fantastic, looking at this and kind of mixing and matching and merging all this into one project. So, and then you got the segment 2, which is the roundabouts, the back end parking, and there is streetscaping also with that, through that segment that goes from 13th down to 18th. So as part of that, we have made a few little minor tweaks to improve things as we've gotten further into the design process. So I want to talk about 2, one being 14th Street and the other one being 16th. I think we have all talked about that 14th Street would be converted from one-way up to a 2-way. Traffic will be able to go both ways there. Just want to make sure that everybody, that's one thing that's kind of gone back and forth, but we have decided to make that 2-way. There's a lot of advantages for circulation, and with the changes that you're going to hear from in the next presentation, I think that also kind of goes along with that too. And then the other change we've made is at 16th. So 16th originally, you may remember we had it was the only intersection that did not have a roundabout. It was stop controlled on each side, on the one side. You still could go all different directions, but as we've gotten survey, we were able to make that roundabout actually happen there also. There is some changing in parking and things like that there. We would be moving parking from in front of the church there. We've looked at maybe moving that to the other side of the street, would be an option, or possibly eliminating it as we kind of go forward and see how things with loading and zones and those things. So that's one thing, that's probably the most major change we made, is actually converting 16th to an actual roundabout now too.
For context there, sorry, but one thing we talked about, and I think Paul and a couple of people brought up a good point when we had our public session, what we see now with drag, what we just call drag racing is basically what happens. We were concerned with that without the roundabout
That's true.
because there's nothing to impede. So,
That people would come out of the roundabout on 15th, and then they wouldn't have a roundabout to 17th, so they would speed up and try to get to the next one. And now you've got that traffic calming all the way through the entire corridor. So,
Another major factor was the access to Community Trust Bank. Some of the dynamics and the geometry that's associated with that, with having that blocked off to where people would have to have gone down a couple blocks, created a lot of problems for them, and Mr. Jones had expressed those. Also would like to thank everybody that I just mentioned, the church. There's been a lot of coordination to come about to not have a dramatic impact on Broadway Square. Again, you were able to do the geometry through the engineering of it, but that wouldn't have happened without those conversations with the church and their willingness to be open to different parking solutions that are there. That, in the end, in the spirit of a win-win, it truly is a win-win situation with them where parking will be adjusted.
Mr. Sewell, can I interrupt you for 1 second? I have a question. I'm assuming where you've got the circle and almost looks like triangles on the outside of that triangle, are those the crosswalks?
so the crosswalks will actually be, and it may be easier to see on the map, but they're back just a little bit.
Okay.
They're not right at the roundabout. They're pushed back into those islands. So yes, there's kind of a gray, like if you're looking on Winchester Avenue, there's like a little gray triangle. At the back of that triangle is where that crosswalk would be.
Where those little yellow marks are up there.
Yeah.
Could that be?
Those are the crosswalks, I will presume.
They're black marks.
The black marks.
The black marks in the middle of the gray.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That's where your crosswalks would be. Now, I will say the one on 16th, Broadway Square, will be a little closer to the intersection there, just because we can't push it all the way down. But since that's one-way traffic only going out, it's not as big a concern for pedestrians.
So I guess my question would be, so obviously we're calming traffic here. The intent is to increase the walkability of the downtown with the lights leaving, the stoplights leaving this space for all these consecutive intersections. How will that assist the walkability without the ability to stop traffic?
So there's two different ways that we can do it. I mean,
That's
bottom
part
line
of
is you're only having to cross
part I
one
can't
lane
actually-
to get, you have a refuge in that middle. We do have an island in the center of the road. So you can cross one lane, you can stand there until another car, and then you can cross the other. So you're only crossing, today you're crossing 4 lanes, but yes, it is signalized. You do have your actual protected time to get across the road. But with the more uniform, there will be gaps that you can get across there. We also have talked about internally, you can have cars yield to pedestrians. There is
Isn't that the
signage for
law?
that. And
Well, that is the law,
Right.
that they yield anyways. I think my concern and question would be, will they?
that there's an education aspect of this that is very much, and we've been talking about how we're going to educate the people as we start building these and during that process. All the safety data where these have been implemented, where roundabouts, cars going slower through these instead of driving, some people probably drive even 50 down through here, but instead of you're driving more in the 20-mile-an-hour range. So you're able to stop easier, you're able to see easier. People, there's a whole lot of safety data, I guess, that says that roundabouts,
reinforces
even
that.
for pedestrians, are safer.
So when I was on vacation, week before last week, I don't remember, and there's a roundabout in the little town that we stay in, and we tested this out, like we kept crossing the roundabout just to see how, because it was a one lane like ours is gonna be, and it was very easy to navigate, and the way that people were going around the circle, they always yield to the pedestrian, every time. There was not a near, and like I said, I kept crossing just because I wanted to test it out.
I think the other major part of this too is that just the dynamic of going from 4 lanes to 2 with the angle parking, it is going to be a very different feel on Winchester because, and even though you might have thought that was a little bit of hyperbole a minute ago on 50 miles an hour, Todd will tell you that we've got a lot of challenges downtown
I've seen it.
of people, you know, just really going at a high rate of speed down there. That changes dramatically with the reversed angle parking, the possibility of people coming out of those slots and going to 2 lanes, which will have its own calming effect.
And like I said, I mean, whether we put up, the one thing we don't want to do is, we don't want to put up a whole bunch of signs that says, you know,
Yeah.
pedestrian crossing ahead, and then put another sign that says pedestrian crossing because, well, it's in a downtown area, and then all of a sudden you end up with a whole bunch of signs that you have to maintain, and then it takes away from
The aesthetic.
the aesthetics part of it, and people just hit them. I mean, is your back, I mean, when you're.
Hit the signs, not the people.
And I was gonna say, not,
Signs, yes, not the
well,
people, the
it's
signs,
definitely not
sorry.
encouraging to hear they even hit the signs.
The signs. But those things, you know, there could be some initial signs that are put up that are maybe, you know, at the little signs that are like, I don't know, they stand about 3 or 4 feet that says yield to pedestrians, and we put those at the crosswalk. Because we're gonna have these bulb outs at the roundabout, the brown area you see in that map. So, and that area is gonna be either landscaped or with some landscaping, or it's gonna be with pavers, those kind of things. So there will be area there that we can set some thing that says yield to pedestrians. Because like you said, it is the law, but do people,
I do think the education aspect of this entire plan is paramount. I'm looking at you.
that's,
You know, I want to say too, I think people will be paying more attention to their driving instead of being on their phone going down Winchester Avenue, because you're approaching those roundabouts and you have to pay more attention. So in my mind, they will see pedestrians easier. I almost got run over by a truck on Winchester about 6 weeks ago. It scared the heck out of me. So I could see that being a factor.
For me, I mean, I think aside from the delivery truck issue, which I don't want to jump ahead to that, but the pedestrian question has always been the biggest question going into this. And I guess my appreciation for how hard it is to cross our streets right now raised once I added a stroller to the mix. And so if you just watch people, I mean, now if I was by myself, I just sprint across. But watch, you know, someone that's pushing something or, you know.
Or can't sprint.
Can't sprint. Absolutely. I think one number that would be really good, and I tried to roughly measure it, but we're going from a 4-lane X amount of feet down to this tapered feet now.
approximately today you're probably close to 60 feet crossing the road, because you have parking spots in there too that, you know, contribute to that. You're down probably less than 30. I mean, you're gonna have 2 lanes that are about 14 feet wide, and then a 2 or 4 foot median in the middle, right around 30.
Right.
So you're cutting it in half. The exposure
So the
time that you're
most
exposed.
you're crossing though at any given time, if you get to the median, is 14 feet? As opposed to 60? Okay.
Yeah.
So you can do that. You can cross it in stages. I mean, some people may want to cross the whole thing, feel more comfortable waiting for that, but you can cross it in stages.
Yeah, which by the way, right now, you don't see a lot of people crossing the street down there because it's not fun to do. But if this does what we have seen it do in other places, there will be a lot more people crossing the street, so.
Could you, you know, we had our public meeting here, I was there, that, I know all of you were too. Could you clarify the delivery truck issue that was
Coming up.
was
think he's
coming up?
getting there.
Okay.
I think it's a pretty good segue into well, I got one more slide before. So I know one of the things that's come up is how we're going to build this. I mean, I know that's one question that I heard from business owners is, how am I gonna maintain my business while you're building this? How can I get to my work while you're constructing this? So I kind of laid out a sequence here. You'll notice in the middle, there's a yellow hatching through the middle, and then you see red all on the outsides. So initially, what we're gonna do is we're gonna close it down to 1 lane each direction. Day 1, we got 4 lanes out there. We don't need 4 lanes. When we're going to 2 lanes, so we're gonna go ahead and put it down to 1 lane each direction. We will push traffic will be driving in the outside lanes. So you'll be driving in the lanes that are closest to the curb. That'll let them build the median all the way down the middle, all the way from 13th to 18th. Now, they will not construct the roundabouts at each one of the intersections, but they can do as much work up to those cross streets as possible. And once we get that built, traffic will be shifted to the inside. So you'll be driving right next to this new median that we just constructed. And with that, that'll allow them to construct the outside where the back end parking will be, where all the red area you see hatched there. But what it will also do is we're going to limit it to where you're only going to be closing through traffic in 1 block. So the yellow area there I showed will be closed to through traffic. Now, business owners will still be able to come in there. You still be able to, parking will be adjusted. I mean, you won't be pulling in right up. There'll be areas where you can designate to park in that area, and then you'll be able to circle back out and leave back out the other end. The actual the cross street will be closed to be able to construct the roundabout in that. And what we have typically done on other projects is we've given them about 21 days, 15 to 21 days of closure, and then that has to be opened back up. It's not taken that long on some of the other projects, but that is something that that way they can build all the stuff in the median, they can build the splitter islands where at each one of the approaches. And then once they finish that block, essentially what would happen is we would go to the next block. And that traffic would open back up and we'd move to the next block. Now, we will not specify the contractor has to start at 13th Street and work its way down. They may choose to start at 18th and work their way back.
With ample notice given to the business owners?
So what we will do is they will have to provide us a plan, a sequence of how they're going to go from one to the other. And at that point, we would say, all right, from this date to this date, we will be closing here. We would give the business owners, I can't imagine why we wouldn't be able to give them at least 7 to 14 days, maybe even 30 days notice of when that was going to happen.
30.
30.
But I think if you know that we don't want to say, the big thing is we don't want to say, okay, April 1, we're going to close this block, and we anticipate it being closed. Well, they get done early. Then we can't start on the next block until, if we've given them that. So I think it's going to be very much keeping everybody on the same page. Like, hey, we think we're going to be done and we're going to be moving down to this section, in 2 weeks.
So you're looking at a 21-day impact to each block at max?
At full closure, well, not being able to drive through. So there could be still some work during that 21 days. They'll be building everything that they can, especially the roundabout. And then, but there still could be some work that is being done, for instance, the sidewalks in front of the businesses and things like that. I don't think there's any way they can do all that in 21 days. To do the pavers, concrete, all that.
And just as a reminder, so there's a couple different aspects of this as Mr. Sewell is talking. You've got what I call between the curbs, and that's all the primary focus of this conversation. But then you do have the streetscape, so that's everything from the curb to everything's going to be replaced on those. In those areas, the flower beds and also other benches, et cetera, so on the areas that need it. So that's, I think, to your point, is there's a lot going on there. There still could be some fine tuning in areas that would have to be done. That's not just necessarily between the curbs, correct?
Right. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, traffic would be impacted for that 21 days. And then they may have a 2-week window or 3-week window where traffic is just doing normal. you know, before they move down to that next section. A lot of those details, we will put restrictions on, hey, you can only close this intersection for 21 days or for 14 days, that kind of thing. But we can't restrict them. Well, you can, but it's just gonna cost more dollars if you put the restrictions on them. So we want to give them the most flexibility to be able to do it, but we have certain things that are key to making sure we maintain some sort of part of normalcy in the downtown area.
I'm feeling a similar feeling about that, but then I'm reminding myself that when Sonic was announced, the perception was that the earth would split open and cars would pile on top of each other until they just flowed into the river.
Yep.
That didn't happen, right? It's actually flows through there pretty good now. The Paramount just closed down Winchester Avenue for, I don't know how many days, just those 2 lanes, but you couldn't drive through at all. Not to say that it's not gonna be a level of inconvenience, absolutely. But it's
Yeah.
also important, again, back to the education, what are we getting for that time?
Well, and I think to your point, Commissioner, there's going to be growing pains and there's going to be some inconvenience, but honest to goodness, we have talked about this for 20 years.
Yes.
And this gets us to Winchester Avenue's 2 lanes, and so I think there are parts of it that are gonna be difficult for us. There's gonna be parts of it that are difficult for our business owners, and we realize that, and we're trying to make sure that it happens the best that it can. But we're getting to where we've tried to get to for 2 decades.
And the message is loud and clear, Mayor and Commissioners. I mean, I think what Stephen is trying to carefully articulate is that we're not gonna say right now today that it's gonna be a specific amount of time, but we'll definitely socialize that plan as soon as we get that back from when the bid comes out, so that all of the businesses have a broad understanding, and then we retain enough flexibility. But again, I saw how you reacted, Mayor, on the 7 days. We want to give them as much notification as possible. And as soon as that coordination goes on with the contractor, if ideally they're making great progress and we go a little bit greater or faster, fantastic, and we'll let the businesses know that. We do have a little bit of experience with this and some of the work we've done downtown. Paul can attest to, Mr. Castle, on concerns about access to the buildings. We haven't really touched on that. That's another thing. It's not just the parking, it's the access to the building when you replace the sidewalks too. And that'll be something that will have to be very carefully coordinated.
Yeah, I think they would build probably the front half of the sidewalk with the sidewalk width we have along downtown. You would build the front half and then put pedestrians on the front and build the back half. I think you would have to split it just so you can maintain access in and out of the businesses. So once you get a contractor, we will specify that certain things are, of timing. But then we work out with the contractor, hey, we have the note in there that says, it's up to engineers' discretion and that kind of thing. And we work with the city and the businesses to actually further define that plan because every contractor is going to want to do it different. So you can't really, we give them a plan, but they're going to have ways that they may choose to do all the stuff on Winchester Avenue day one first, and then come back and build the stuff on the sidewalks and all that at the end, once traffic is already driving slower.
Well, our small business community is fragile, and it's important that we do everything we can to update and alert them of any changes, because any days that obviously they don't have access to parking is going to be very impactful to their business.
So this slide just kind of goes to the next. I was just trying to say block by block is what we will do, kind of going through the corridor. So the other big thing we heard was from a loading zone standpoint. How are we going to get our deliveries? Where are we going to our delivery people are going to park? And this will be blown up in just a second so everybody can see a little bit more detail. So what we did is we put out a online survey that we was given to all the businesses in downtown in this area. We also hand delivered some surveys to folks so they could fill out and bring back into to Steve, I believe. And we I think we ended up getting right around 20-ish surveys back. We offered to have one-on-one meetings. You could request to have a one-on-one meeting with us to talk about your business specifically or your block specifically. So what you'll see here is each one of these obviously the north side of Winchester Road has different needs than the south side. The people west of 14th have different needs than the people on 15th. So we've kind of broken this into a block by block segment. Now, the colors kind of represent how we grouped them together. So you'll notice that the purple and the green there kind of go together, that we kind of looked at loading and unloading for those together. So, for instance, the theater is an easy one. They have a big parking lot beside their building, and they also have a loading zone in front of it there. So that one was super easy to come up with. You'll notice on the red building across the street, we've designated an area there that's kind of a little red area that you see right in front of the building. We would designate that as a loading zone. We would designate, we also, as part of the survey, we asked whether they get deliveries in the AM, the PM, or at lunch. So that kind of, there's that dynamic too, is some of the businesses only get them in the AM, so maybe we just block out this loading zone from 6 to 9 AM. And then after that, it can become regular parking. Obviously, I know Chief Kelly is super excited about having to enforce that. But that's something else that we work through as we go through this. But so that's kind of the area. You'll notice the purple we've put on to, would be on, I believe that is 14th. Yeah, 14th. So we have that on the side of 15th there. So we've kind of put them on the side streets is where we want to, with all of the angle parking along the front of, on Winchester Avenue, we were looking at doing the loading zones in the parallel parking on the side streets. We did offer, we had 2 scheduled time frames that business owners could come meet. We did a before lunch, I think it was 11 to 1. And then we also did another one at like 4 to 5:30. And we did get a couple businesses that came and met with us. So the other option is, we still have I will say this is still a work in progress. There are some that we have some striped out medians in the middle where we don't need 2 lanes coming up to the intersection now. We can take that, the roundabout only has 1 lane going into it. So we could even stripe out an area in the middle and the loaders could unload from the middle of the street if that's an avenue that we've talked about. And one thing that is really not even mentioned here is you do have the back alleys that they can use. But our goal, and some businesses may choose to do that depending on where they can get their deliveries into their business. But we were trying to accommodate it at least as close to where they get their deliveries today. So I think like I said, I think we got a large portion of the businesses. We did offer to have meetings with them. And that could still, if there's others that want to meet with us after this, then we can obviously make that happen also.
Real quick on the delivery trucks, I'm just thinking about this. We had talked, I think last year at some time, even if we only just went down to 2 lanes and did nothing else, kept lights and kept parallel parking and all of that, the delivery trucks right now, they stop in the right lane, right? And you got to go around them, and somebody's coming down going literally 50 miles an hour sometimes. That's not an exaggeration, by the way. And you got to watch. And so that's what happens right now. If we went down to 2 lanes and did nothing else, then the delivery truck would stop and you wouldn't go anywhere, right? So even if we only went to
That
2 lanes,
problem
you're still
regardless,
going to have
yeah.
that problem if we've got cars in the parking spots.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So.
I know parking was one of the things that we discussed at the last meeting together with the 3 options. Do you recall what the original parking amount, the parking spaces amount was?
I do not remember that actual number.
Is there a net gain
There
with
is a
this
net-
plan?
Yeah, so there is actually a net gain. I will say it is very small.
Like,
I remember
Like
this.
less than
yeah.
5 net gain along Winchester Avenue.
okay.
That's only looking along Winchester.
Yeah, it was like
So
5, that was
it
big.
was, but what we've also provided is, as part of this, we've provided ADA
Lines.
spots along Winchester Avenue. There is 1 per block on each side, so 2 per block. So you have 1 on the north side, parking on north side of Winchester, that's ADA and it's van accessible, and 1 on the south side. So depending on whether, and they're staggered, so we put one in, like one at 14th and one at 15th. That way, depending on if you're trying to go to a business at 15th, you may choose to come and park on that 15th side. So that takes up about a little over 2 spots, is why we only have a net gain of 5. I think it's less than 5. It's right around 5. So, you know, if we decide that we only need 1, then, you know, you could add probably 1 to 2 spots per block.
The other thing that's going to have an impact on this, as I've briefed very topically in previous meetings, is that we will have a parking management plan that we intend to implement upon the completion of this project. So that'll be for the public to know. That's kiosks, different time zones for areas that we're trying to move traffic in high-density areas, and have a little bit more flexibility on the rest of Winchester. And we've been blessed with the parking garage too, which will be part of that solution also.
So a big part of slowing down or calming the traffic, as you have educated us, is the parking. You know, if we have a lot of people downtown and they're parking only on one lane, that's going to significantly slow the traffic through there. You're like, yep,
So,
that's what I said.
so from a project status, we've had our 50% review plans. We're at about, I would say we're probably in the 75 to 80% completion on plans at the moment. Still some tweaks that have to be made. We have a preliminary streetscaping plan that right now that we've overlaid that into our plans, and we're meeting next week with the city to work out. There's some things that do streetscaping or where the sidewalk goes and that how it all works together. So that we'll be working through that. We also are coordinating with utility companies, trying to get everything that is known out here. I'm sure we're going to find some that people didn't know were there or
Sure.
as we get into this, but we are meeting with the utility company also next week out here on site to work through some of theirs. As I mentioned earlier, we're still coordinating with KTC because ultimately we have to get an encroachment permit from them for this project, and with Calva as we go through this whole process for funding and their input. So, I mean, back and forth there. And then we are working through the environmental document. Since we are using federal funds, we do have to do an environmental document, but environmental document is really, it'll look at some historic aspects of the area, but for everything we're doing here, it's a betterment. I mean, we're enhancing the historic aspects by improving the infrastructure along through the area. So I don't anticipate any issues there. It's just it's the lowest level environmental document we have. So funding. This is probably the biggest thing. I'm sure everybody's excited to hear about this part. As we mentioned, there's 3 segments. Segment from 7th to 13th is right at $1 million for that aspect of it. That funding is 80% will be, we're applying for 80% through Calva. That application will go in January. And 20% match from that will be through the city. So the city would be right at about $200,000 for that segment. The segment 2, 13th through 18th, inside the curb, all the roundabouts and all the work in the street work is using KTC funds, which is 100%. One of the things, we'll use it's called HSIP funds, which is Highway Safety Improvement. And with the roundabouts, with the back end parking, I know you all have heard me say, and then the road diet of changing it from 4 to 2, you've heard me call it the trifecta. I have talked with KTC and they still are committed for that as of a couple weeks ago. So I think that all is, since it is like I'm not going to call it they have a separate amount of funds that can be 80%. I mean, it'd be 100%, and some of their funds can be matches, but this is all with implementation money with new stuff, innovative safety things. This will be eligible for 100% reimbursement there. So there's no cost to the city on that part. And then, like, if I say something wrong here, you can drop that. And then the streetscaping part, the part that's outside of the curb, now that part has to come from will come through Kiowa. We'll apply for Kiowa funds there again, which is back to the 80-20 money there. Which is roughly about $1 million, so another $200,000 of city match. And then segment 3 on 18th to 22nd is pretty much the same. It's right at $1 million with 80-20. So total construction is $5.5 million, and the city's portion of that match is right at $600,000. So you're getting, ultimately, by the time all the, right at 10% that you're really, if you look at it from a project total.
You like it?
So to be honest, that's almost, of all the projects I've ever done, that's almost unheard of.
And we talked about putting our, excuse me, parking kiosks in at the same time when we did the, okay,
We'll synchronize that.
yeah. We don't want to tear it up again.
So future steps, we anticipate having final plans in January. We will submit those to the state and hopefully have an encroachment permit from them in February, early March timeframe. We will, as I mentioned, we'll be applying to Kiowa for funding. Keep our fingers crossed that that funding comes through in March for a construction, for spring construction letting. And there'll be construction activities in spring, fall, from the spring to the fall of next year. And then when you have, at the end of your next year, you can have your meeting out on the on Winchester Avenue.
Sounds good.
With that, that is, I know I probably went longer than my allotted time, but
No, appreciate your giving us some details today that some of us didn't have, and it's important that we have this information as we move forward. So I appreciate your time and the in-depth information you did provide to us today. So I thank you.
yeah. And like I said, if there's, as we go through this, I'm sure we get closer to that letting, we'll have things finalized. You can get answers from me about any time.
One thing we didn't see here that we saw, you did an excellent job of showing last year, was the traffic measurements that you literally measured the traffic flow, and then I think we even added some growth into that for the amount of cars. I mean, there was a simulation of like the cars actually moving. So, because that's one of the questions that I've also gotten was, how do you know that the level of traffic that you have can, so we've done that. We saw that last year. So.
Yeah, that was all part of the original studies. This phase of the project is really more design, getting these engineering plans done and ready for construction, so.
I think it's an excellent point. If you remember, the traffic scenario showed the traffic that was actually counted, and then they doubled it in the simulator, and the KYTC grades on that ABCD, like a school grade scale, and I think it was 1 hour, if I'm not misremembering this, 1 hour, 1 day a week, that got a rating of C, which is acceptable. So basically just saying that Greenup can handle what this is going to push over to Greenup.
100%.
Well, Mr. Sewell, unless there's any other questions, Mayor, Commissioners? Thank you very much.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it for the update and look forward to continuing to work with you. That slide, the money slide, is the one that probably excites me more than anything else. And one of the things I always hear since I've been here is the Winchester Wall, and the state doesn't consider Ashland for a lot of things. And I think when you look at this and you see what the state is committing to this, that kind of tears that down a little bit. So I appreciate KYTC's willing to roll with this. And Terry, again, thank you very much for all the coordination you're helping us with Kyle, because we couldn't do that without you, without your helping us through that process. So thank you all very much. Mr. Sewell, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce Mr. Tylen Oaten. He's from Convention, Sports, and Leisure. Mr. Oaten's going to give an update on the feasibility study that the city commissioned to take a look at the feasibility of a conference center for the city. So with that, Tyler.
Michael. Well, excited to be here. A little bit of background just about myself, my firm, CSL. We've been around for about 35 years, doing strategic plans, feasibility studies for public assembly facilities, so convention centers, arenas, stadiums, hotels. We were joined in our project by EOP Architects based out of Lexington, Kentucky. And just to start off, we're not quite at the stage that the streetscape is at, right? We're not going to be looking at designs here or plans quite yet. We're going to be looking at the economics and research behind whether or not a conference center could function here in Ashland. and how big that conference center should be based on our interviews of event planners, looking at facilities around the country, and who you're going to be competing with. This is heavily based on research. This is just a quick overview of everything that went into the feasibility study. The whole purpose is to look, as I mentioned, how large is this facility going to be? What's the correct facility, public assembly facility for Ashland? And this is very focused on the site. If you're not familiar with it, the site next to the Delta Hotel on Winchester Avenue. So with these streetscape improvements that could be going in with the new Delta Hotel, there's momentum in downtown to really build something that could bring in not just people in the local community for weddings and those kinds of things, but non-local functions. You could bring in conferences, conventions from the state level, the region level, even some smaller national conventions possibly to Ashland. We kicked the study off with a site visit actually back in May, met with some key stakeholders, had some telephone interviews with others from the local community, not just to talk about the history of the area, but what the need is for event space, again, for some of those local events like weddings, reunions. Then we also looked at your competitive and comparable sets. So we identified 9 competitive venues around the state that we'll take a look at. We also looked at 17 comparable venues and markets that are of a similar size in terms of CVSA population. So your peers were slightly larger, slightly smaller than you. Looked at their facilities, and that helped us figure out how should this be sized here. And then most importantly, we did the out-of-market outreach. So we spoke to about 35 event planners representing just over 50 annually rotating events from the state and regional level to get their take on how interested would they be in coming to Ashland, how large are their events, and what would their ideal facility look like here in the community. So this is a little small, a little tough to look at, but this is the overview of who you'd be competing with if we were to build a conference center in Ashland. And you'll notice that we don't have Lexington or Louisville highlighted. They've actually, their convention centers have recently undergone major expansions, major improvements. Their whole goal has been ascending from the state regional marketplace to the national marketplace. That's what they're hosting more so nowadays. Maybe some large regional events and some national conferences and conventions. What we're seeing in Kentucky is a little bit of this watershed effect, with events now at the state regional level looking at the smaller venues on the periphery of the state, so the north, south, east, west. So you're talking about Bowling Green, Covington to the north. Here in eastern Kentucky, and somebody, as they mentioned earlier, we are the biggest city in eastern Kentucky. We have far from the largest facility in eastern Kentucky. We have a 4,000, or I should say a 3,000 square foot ballroom at the Delta. We can use Paramount, but it's not ideal when you have an 18,000 square foot conference hall over in Pikeville, and then, over in Moorhead. Pikeville has about a 6,000 square foot ballroom at their arena that actually is fairly busy because it's the only space in the geographic region. So we're kind of talking about this event space desert in the eastern region. And more importantly, we're going to have to hear about would event planners who are heavily based in western and central Kentucky, would they make it out to eastern Kentucky? And we'll look at those results in a few slides here. This is the look at comparable conference centers, convention centers, and some very similar sized communities. This is a layout of their largest contiguous spaces, so their exhibit halls, their ballrooms. On this previous slide, the median in the competitive set is about 18,000 square feet. That's actually how large the conference room in Moorhead is. Again, here in these similar sized communities, you're talking about a median of about 18,000 square feet. So we're starting to look at a number that feels about right for a largest room in a community of this size. Total sellable space adds in things like exhibit space, ballroom space, meeting space. That's about a median of about 38,000 square feet. So this starts to give us some of the data we need to properly size something that might work in Ashland. This is an extrapolation of the event spaces and the ratio of event spaces and the population and corporate base levels in each of those 17 communities we reviewed. So based on their populations and corporate bases within 30 minutes, 2 hours, and 4 hours, those are kind of the markets you're working in when you have a conference center that's maybe going to pull in state and regional trade shows, conventions. This starts to suggest a facility that might have 27,000 square feet of sellable space. If we take a look at the average on the far right of the table, the largest contiguous space, about 15,500 or 16,000 square feet. Again, similar size to what we're talking about from the competitive analysis and the comparable analysis. And then hotel room inventory. As far as a headquarter hotel room, that means the hotel that's going to be adjoined to the conference center. This would suggest 140 rooms. We have that today in the Delta at over 150 rooms. That's great news. The hotels within a half mile, we'd probably need to prioritize the development of other hotels within walking distance. So this says we need about 240 rooms within a half mile. So maybe another 180 to 100 rooms within the downtown might be needed to support the activity that would be going in a conference center. And then this is the most important part of the study, the outreach to the event planners. So this is the interest among those 35 planners and their 50 events surveyed. And is very, very promising. And I shouldn't say we were pleasantly surprised. I really, really enjoyed Ashland when I was out here in May. Perfect weather. It's highly walkable. I love the drive out here. Very, very scenic. So I was expecting positive interest over 50, maybe around 55. But we actually had 61% positive interest rate. 18% said definitely, 21% said that they would likely come to an event center here in Ashland if it had the size and the hotels that they needed. And we have a table to the right that kind of compares that to 65 different comparable studies that we've done in the past. So that positive interest rate far above the average. The strength of interest is actually one of the strongest strength of interest responses we've ever had. Strength of interest meaning those who said they would definitely or likely come to a venue here. That gives us a demand index score of about 2.9, which is well above average. So promising interest, the question is how big of a facility do we need to build?
1 second, because when we went through this, if the general public looks at this, they're gonna see that biggest number, and we talked about this in our meeting, but the way to look at this is to combine those top three.
Right.
That's
Sure.
the interest, and that doesn't mean definitely not because Ashland's terrible, we never wanna go there. It's because of some other reason. They can't for some reason.
Yeah, that's fair to say,
Or they're
definitely
too far
not.
away, right? Some kind of extenuating circumstance.
If there's uncontrollable factors, it's
Yeah.
pretty normal. 27% is, 25 to 30% is pretty typical with these studies. There's plenty of events that we contact who have a long-term agreement with an existing facility. They're gonna go there for 10 years. Or maybe they only go to Central or Western Kentucky because that's just where their membership base is. There's nothing we can do about that. The not likelies are those that maybe we consider it long-term, but I think for some of those, they were much, much larger events that, would have to look at how big the package is here in Ashland. Then we have the exhibit space needs. So this is also an important question, is how much exhibit space do you need for your event? Because that's going to tell us how big of a single room do we need to build. Of course, we know we're going to need supporting ballroom and meeting space. But this is the largest room in the facility, is the exhibit hall. So this is where you're hosting your trade show activity, where you're going to have vendors, exhibitors setting up. It's important to note 50% of planners don't even need this exhibit hall. They don't need exhibit space. There's simple conferences or meetings that are just going to need a ballroom or meeting room. But for those who do need it, that 18,000 square foot number actually captures us 85% on the market. So 85% of exhibit space needs is captured again by 18,000 square feet. We do typically say to build a facility that accommodates 85 to 90% of demand. You don't want to build 100%. That's building the church for Easter Sunday, right? So you're building something for 1 or 2 events. Again, these are rotating events that might come here every 4 years. But if you're building around that 85% mark, there's several half a dozen events that are going to be possibly on your calendar that might use that whole space. So our recommendations, just based on market alone, and this is the optimal building program, would be to build a facility that offers preferably around 30,000 square feet of sellable event space. And that's broken down into 3 things: that exhibit space, ballroom space, meeting space. The exhibit space is more of a multi-purpose hall in this market. So it's not concrete floor, but would be very high ceiling, 30 feet high, carpeted, subdivisable into possibly 2 or 3 spaces. That's going to be your trade show floor. And that's preferably going to be 18,000 square feet. We suggest maybe 15 to 18,000 square feet, but that's going to be the hall size you need. Ballroom space, a supporting ballroom would also be needed. We recommend 5,000 to 7,000 square feet for that. And then additional breakout meeting space. So this would be broken down into 7 or 8 meeting rooms with 4,000, 5,000 square feet of space, in addition to ample pre-function. And then one thing to note here that's very important is the outdoor event space. So rooftop terrace, preferably that would overlook the bridges over to the northwest. And so we actually have this venue that could be sold as a standalone venue. It could be sold for weddings, banquets. We see that at event spaces all the time. You know, this would be the place to take a photo shoot. It could also be combined with the uses of the rest of the facility. So conferences, conventions, one of the big things we see increasingly is this preference for an outdoor space. They actually require outdoor event spaces now where 5 years ago, that was a nice luxury, but this is actually the place where they want to host their general session instead of in a ballroom. And then also we talked about parking. And one thing that we don't have in this deck, but we do have in our full report, is a little bit of a look, a very high-level design of how this space would be built out. With the site that we're working with at the Delta Hotel, we're talking about something that would be stacked, so multiple stories. So parking, what do you do with parking? We talk about underground parking, actually under the venue. There's multiple ways, maybe there's a parking structure depending on the ultimate venue solution, but there's plenty of ways to, yes, replace the parking that's there, and we know that there's a need to actually add parking. And we do recommend 250 to 275 nearby parking spaces. You know, there might be an opportunity to increase the parking that's at the hotel today. These are some just important elements to include, just 4 high-level trends that should be a part of the design, the ultimate building design. And one thing that we stress with projects around the country, especially at this time, is the new build opportunity is very, very exciting because coming out of COVID, we have a lot of new preferences among event planners. And even before COVID, we have this generational change going on where more millennials, Gen Zers are taking over the helm of event planners. And they are reimagining the event space layout. They have new needs from a convention building. And that includes hybrid space, technologies that support hybrid meetings. So you have an in-person element, a couple hundred people, thousands of people could maybe attend online. You can imagine maybe a conference is here with 300 people and it gets to be published and broadcast in real time. It's also content that could then be redistributed afterward, and you get 10,000, 50,000 people who actually get to watch a video that's filmed here in Ashland. And that would be an important opportunity to have Ashland branding as part of that video. Signature outdoor event space, as I already mentioned, that's more and more of a need. Walkable districts. We've seen in all of our surveys, we've done some surveys with planners of asking them, has your interest increased in mid-sized, smaller urban areas? And about 2/3 of event planners said yes. So prior to the pandemic, they are now looking for smaller markets, particularly that are urban, walkable. You know, we fill those criteria. And then dynamic meeting spaces. So meeting spaces that are naturally lit, larger, higher ceilings, have more portable furniture, like the cantilever room that's in San Antonio in the bottom right there. It's no longer the static, fluorescent lit, no window meeting room. So that's the design. Those are the recommendations. And there is a significant opportunity, as we saw from the event planners. And it would result in these economic impacts. You know, we assume this would be a heavily utilized building, both by the local community, because I think there is a significant need for a venue that can host even 500 or more people for a large wedding or banquet. And then we're talking about bringing in a number of conferences, possibly 2 a month, that are from the state and regional level, that are going to bring in those non-local dollars. They're going to be spending the night at hotel rooms. So all in all, by a stabilized year of operations, if we were to go with this market supportable solution, as I've mentioned, that's about 13,300 new hotel room nights in the community. That is about $9 million, just over $9 million in direct spending. So the spending on the hotel rooms, the spending on the restaurants, spending on retail, going to live shows at the Paramount, these are all dollars that are not being spent here today, obviously. We're bringing in people who are net new to the community. And this would be on an annual basis of $9 million. As those dollars are spent, there's a multiplier effect. It ends up going throughout the community, goes into wages and earnings. Businesses end up spending that money in other ways in the local economy. So in terms of total economic output, we're actually looking at about $15.2 million per year if we were to invest in this facility. That results in about $6.2 million in wages and earnings. That's wages and earnings for local employees. And then in terms of new jobs that technically supports, it's about 191 jobs per year. Not to mention there's also a number of construction impacts in terms of spending a construction project of this kind of magnitude, where you're talking about 500 employees involved in building the facility. There is a little bit of a price tag that comes with building any public assembly facility. And as we're in a time with record inflation and record escalation in terms of construction, we would be remiss if we didn't bring any other options to the table that probably are more affordable, but you do lose some of that market share that we've talked about, and looking at if we were to build that 18,000 square foot room. So we do have other options, option 2, 3, and 4. Option 2 is essentially a downsized version of everything that we're talking about. Instead of 30,000 square feet of sellable space, we have 24. And it's just a smaller version, smaller multi-purpose hall, smaller ballroom, smaller meeting room. And we dropped from a 94% market share of sellable space to 84%. So, if we were to think of a letter grade system, we go from an A to a B with option 2, but we probably save, say, 25% on construction. Option 3 is about 20,000 square feet of sellable space, and it's slightly different. It's only 1 story. So it's probably half the project cost, but it is just 1 story. You lose ballroom space, you lose the supporting ballroom. You can build a 16,000 square foot exhibit hall, so you still get your trade shows. You have meeting space in that venue, but you're going to have to rely heavily on the hotel next to it to offer its meeting space and ballroom space. There could be an opportunity for a rooftop deck on top of that one that would add slightly to project costs. Again, that drops us to a B, and I should say that includes the hotel space. So it's really more like a B minus. Option 3 is more like a B minus if we were to go by market share. And then option 4 was an exercise that we worked with our architects on, and how big of a room could we build if we were just to build on the city-owned site next to Delta Hotel. That gives us a 6,000 square foot ballroom. That's the smallest of all the options, obviously. But it actually, it gives us a huge lift as far as what we could bring into town. There are some state events that only require that amount of space. But it does bring us to 50% market share. We saw that slide where only 50% of events needed exhibit space. So those are the events that don't bring in as much economic impact. They don't have as many hotel room nights. They would probably require a couple dozen hotel rooms at a time at the Delta Hotel. So it would be a huge boon to Delta's business. I think that would add to their bottom line as far as food and beverage revenue goes, but they wouldn't require additional hotel rooms. There wouldn't be as many attendees needing hotel rooms outside that hotel building. There wouldn't be as many attendees spending as much money on restaurants and retail. So that 50% market share, in theory, an F, but it's still a viable solution, I think, for the hotel, and would bring some impact to the market here, but wouldn't be the transformational project as option 1 or even 2 or 3 would be. And these are comparisons, just a quick overview of what we're losing as far as that economic impact goes. So the 15.2 million in total economic output from option 1 drops to about 11.3 in option 2. It drops to about 10.7 on option 3. And then it's a very different project in option 4. It is very much a boutique conference center that we're building, and that's about 3.2 million in terms of total economic output. In terms of job creation, we dropped from 163 per year for option 1 to 31. So a loss of 130 jobs per year, comparing option 1 to option 4. I don't have a question slide. I should have added a question slide. But
Well, I can tell you, it's so important that we remain competitive as a city for opportunities for conventions, conferences. And I know, again, Commissioner Bland has mentioned this before, this has been a consideration of commissions before us, many commissions before us. And the one thing we are certain of is that we do really well recycling our own money in our local economy. The key ingredient is bringing outside money into our local economy and providing fresh eyes on a community that is eager for them to invest their expansion of their businesses, potentially bring their families here to raise and see the quality education that we have in our community. So I think this is a heartening presentation to us because we thought we knew what we knew about our community, and I think this further tells us that we're on the right track.
Absolutely. Yeah, really, really promising results. And it is an opportunity to really, marry this initiative with all these plans for improving downtown. And as we've seen throughout the country and a lot of the projects we do, the the real initiative that can get smaller, mid-sized markets onto the national stage is by investing in these facilities that are in a downtown. And you have a very promising downtown already. It reminds me of, we did a project about 10 years ago for Lancaster, Pennsylvania, who built their Lancaster Convention Center. Once they built it, I believe their restaurants, the number of restaurants in their downtown increased by a good 50 to 60% once they built that venue. So you are talking about, doubling the type of foot traffic in this small condensed area to support this whole new urban neighborhood where you're going to have restaurants, you're going to have maybe a convenience store because of the operations of this building.
And hopefully more residential above those shops.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doing some rough math off that, it looked like the return was, with using economic output, saying return overall was roughly 4 to 5 years. Is that, do you know of an average for most places can expect?
I would say, so it depends on how you define return. Economic output, I would say 4 to 5 years is it's probably faster than we typically see. We would say like in the 10-year range, you typically get your return back. Another way to look at it is fiscal return, tax revenue generation. That's a much, slower direct return. But I think here as well, in terms of sales tax, retail, and hotel tax, it's above average impacts from that.
Well, I think it's all very exciting. You can see our eyes light up, and Commissioner Clark is right. We've been waiting for years to take a look at this, and this is all positive. So.
No, it's a huge opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Todd,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you very much.
Thank you.
I also want to mention, City Manager thanked Terry Sicking with COVA, and I want to mention Blake Jones with KYTC for their assistance in funding these other opportunities for us. But Ms. Sicking, I also want to thank you for your efforts volunteering for our Winter Wonderland. And you're behind the scenes and like to stay that way, but I know that this wouldn't happen without you and some other key folks working so well on our parade and getting lights ready for the park. So we want to thank you specifically for that as well.
Mayor, I had a couple other comments. Also, I'd like to recognize Roddy Williams, if you could raise your hand, Senior Vice President from Strand, and also Joe Carey, Project Manager from Strand. It's one of the items that we've got on our agenda today is talking the wastewater treatment plant. Also, we had some great news last week. The entertainment district that we had applied for had been approved. And I'd like Corporation Counsel to just briefly go through a quick description of what that is.
Did you hear the audible cheer?
And the key word will be brief. This is a result of the ordinance that you all passed earlier in the year, which authorized the creation of an entertainment destination center district and allowed staff to apply for that license. The license has now been granted. The district that is created, just to refresh your memories and the public, is from 13th to 18th Streets on Winchester Avenue, and then 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th from the south side of Greenup Avenue to the south side of Carter Avenue, which is the basic downtown area that we've been working with. And what this allows, as it's currently structured, during special events in that area, which are approved by the city as part of our special event ordinance, licensed alcohol purveying businesses will be able to do two things. One, if the license holder gets a supplemental bar license, they will be able to, with the permission of the city, they'll be able to operate that supplemental bar in the common areas, which is sidewalks and streets of the city during the special event. What this does, and I see Randy here, First Friday, for instance, I think had to get a license every Friday and apply and have that approved, and it was somewhat cumbersome. This would allow an existing business who had a supplemental license then to take that off them, and during First Friday or Broadway nights or whatever, they could sell beer and whatnot within the district during that time period. The second thing that it does, again, during the special event permit in that area, license holders were allowed to sell alcoholic beverages in an approved vessel, a cup, if you will, approved by the city, and then they can be taken out of that licensed premises into the common areas, the streets and sidewalks in that district, or into other licensees, not into other businesses generally, but into other licensees during that event. So in other words, you can buy a beer at the Winchester and go out to First Friday, and then if you decide you want to eat at Fat Patty's, and you haven't finished your beer, you can take it in there and order your meal. All of this is designed to be an aid to tourism and economic development, and is sort of hand in hand with the other things that we've been discussing today in the revitalization of downtown. So this has now been approved and in effect, and when we start our special event schedule, which I guess will probably be in the spring for different events, this will be available.
Could I make a comment, Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely.
Well, I have to say how far we've come. The first time I came down here to apply for a beer license for the first Chili Fest, I was turned down by the city commission. And that's what made me decide to run for city commissioner. So that very first one, I had to move the beer tent onto private property in order to have beer with chili. Never had a problem there, and I'm so proud to say how, I mean, really, it's just so exciting how far we've come with this. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, a couple other comments, unless there's anything else on the entertainment district. This will be the last time I'm reporting on this because I think this is our new standard, but our disinfectant byproduct, which is something we want to avoid at the water treatment plant, has pre-5 years ago was pretty high. We've in our 24th consecutive quarter with no HAA5s and our 22nd consecutive quarter without any TTHM, which are both disinfectant byproducts. So kudos to the utilities team for their great work. Samantha Salyers, if you'd stand up, please. I'd like to recognize an employee accomplishment. Samantha, who's our HR specialist, has been nominated for the 2023 Kentucky Public Human Resources Association as a director for the offices and board of directors to serve in a 2-year term. KHRA is an affiliate of Kentucky League of Cities devoted to human resources professionals in the public sector, and this is a recognition of her impact on that community statewide. So great job, Samantha.
Congratulations.
And just show a couple pictures that we've got. The sidewalk replacement process has started. You'll notice this is work that occurred down on 7th Street near Carter. Next, please. Also, another significant notification we had this week is that for the year and a half, Corporation Council, we've been trying to get trademark protection on our branding, and that also came in. I think that was last week. Do you want to just briefly talk on that, Jim?
Well, it just, it protects our logo. It can't be used without your permission. There were some instances when people use your brand and it implies your endorsement of a product or service that we didn't necessarily endorse or approve of. And now with this trademark protection, it becomes a registered trademark. That's illegal and can't be done. And if we find anybody doing it, we'll take action to stop them. So that's the.
So you'll notice a trademark that we've added to each of those symbols, and that a lot of great work by Jim and former Public Information Officer Michelle Grubb. Next, also, you'll see an item on the agenda today for the Oliverio Park All-Inclusive. This is the initial artist rendition that, or the sketch that will be existing in Oliverio Park. Some similarities to what we have in Central Park, but there's also differences. Next, please.
I want to thank the Parks Department and the Parks Board for their work in all this.
And this is something, this is on Belmont Street. If you remember, we get complaints for, at least since I've been here, about what people think is a water leak coming from. To the right hand of the screen is basically the cemetery. And Jack and his folks got in there, Public Services, and put a French drain, a pretty significant French drain, and it's been dry so far. We hope this is a long-term solution, but we'll continue to adjust it. But that has never been a water leak there. That's been a spring that's been there for decades, and just something I'm proud that the city had taken care of. The last 3 things I have: we continue progress on the pay and compensation study. Strategic plan process is continuing to move with Raftellus, and I've already mentioned the parking management. Mayor, that's all I have.
Okay. All right, now we move on to public participation. Anyone with a comment or request may come to the podium and address the commission concerning matters related to city business, services, or personnel. Comments related to election issues or concerning personal disputes will not be allowed. We will ask that presentations be limited to 5 minutes. A yellow light indicates 30 seconds remain. A red light means the time limit has expired. Only one speaker is permitted per subject. No action will be taken at this meeting. Those with comments are asked to fill out the inquiry form and leave it with the city clerk for the distribution to the proper city department. Would anybody like to come forward at this time? Hearing none, we'll move on to old business.
You moved too fast for me, Mayor. Old business, item A, second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to submit the program year 2022 amended action plan." Original action plan was adopted, ordinance number 124, series of 2022, increasing the community development block grant in the amount of $68,292.30, and upon acceptance of said application from HUD to execute on behalf of the city of Ashland an agreement with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to enable the city to undertake these activities and/or any and all documents associated with the grant submittal.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Item B, second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a contract between the City of Ashland and Thoroughbred Construction Group, LLC, for the water treatment plant roof replacement in the amount of $223,668.45 for the Department of Utility Operations Division of Water Production."
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Item C, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a contract between the City of Ashland and Rossman Enterprises, Inc., DBA Magna Grip, for the purchase and installation of a vehicle exhaust system in the amount of $158,807 for the Ashland Fire Department."
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item D, second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a contract between the City of Ashland and All American Fire Equipment for the purchase of bunker gear in the amount of $122,550 for the Ashland Fire Department."
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item E, second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a memorandum of agreement between the Commonwealth of Kentucky Energy and Environmental Cabinet, Division of Abandoned Mine Lands, and the City of Ashland to govern the design of the Ashland Convention Center Abandoned Mine Land Economic Revitalization Project, appointing Commissioner Amanda Clark as the project representative, and authorizing and directing the mayor to execute on behalf of the City of Ashland any and all documents associated with the grant.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Should I abstain?
No, you can vote for yourself.
Okay,
You can
aye.
vote for yourself.
I wasn't here the last meeting, and so I wasn't sure.
That'll teach you.
I know. Y'all, you put me in there, I was gone.
Yeah. Item F, second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky adjusting the compensation for the mayor and city commissioners." And Mayor, Mr. Mayor, this has been amended, and so there's a first reading of another compensation ordinance on. So recommendation is that we have no motion or second on this and allow the second reading to fail, and we'll deal with this on a new first reading
Do we
later
have-
in the meeting.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion? Hearing none, motion fails.
Item G, second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky establishing fees for parking spaces in the parking garage located at the 17th Street and Carter Avenue."
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item H, second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky amending sections 1 through 9 of ordinance number 32, series of 2018, previously amended by ordinance number 176, series of 2021, commonly known as the Garbage, Sewer, and Water Ordinance, regulating the collection and disposal of garbage."
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a question. Are we planning on putting anything out that outlines those changes?
We've got it prepared.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Item I, second reading and final adoption of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky amending the City of Ashland Flexible Spending Plan," adopted by ordinance number 86, series of 2020, as recommended by McGregor and Associates, Inc., pursuant to federal guidelines.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda?
Resolution of the City of Ashland, Kentucky adopting, authorizing, and approving the course of action presented by the city manager on the items appearing on the consent agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of City Commissioners of December 15th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
New business, item A, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a conditional commitment letter and subsequent grant assistance agreement between the City of Ashland and the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority for a grant in the amount of $300,000 for the pump station rehabilitation project, and authorizing and directing the mayor to execute on behalf of the city of Ashland any and all documents associated with the grant.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item B, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky adopting the Housing Choice Voucher Program payment standards for the City of Ashland Community and Economic Development Department, Division of Assisted Housing, Section 8, effective January 1, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Item C, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an employee assistance program management agreement between the City of Ashland and the Ashland Hospital Corporation, DBA King's Daughters Medical Center, for a period of 3 years beginning January 1, 2023, as a continuation of the agreement beginning January 1, 2004, adopted by ordinance number 146, series of 2003.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item D, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a contract between the City of Ashland and Bluegrass Recreation Sales and Installation LLC for the installation of inclusive playground equipment at Oliverio Park in the amount of $389,052.77 for the Department of Parks and Recreation."
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item E, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky designating a handicap parking space on the north side of Korean War Veterans Way, formerly known and referred to as Market Street, at its intersection with 17th Street, and providing a penalty for the violation of this ordinance."
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I just want to mention, last week I was able to host some children that were visually impaired here at the city building. And I'm ashamed to say how much I take the simple things for granted, and I think this is an important step. It may be simple to us, but it's monumental to folks that may have issues, and we must do all we can to make accommodations, so I appreciate this ordinance. All in favor?
Aye.
Can I go back to D just a minute?
No?
No? I'll come at the end.
You can go back and comment if you want. I mean, it's already passed, but
It's already passed,
Did
but
you
I
mention
just have
reopening?
a
Go.
question. How are we, what's the status of the bathrooms up there right now
Specifically?
at Oliverio?
Yeah, what's that mean? Are they working?
Are they
Open?
open, or are they gonna be redone, or are we gonna use the Little Leagues, or what's the status of that concession stand up there? Where we gonna put that
The
playground?
concession stand exists. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, Commissioner, I'm not sure what you're asking, I'm sorry.
Do we own that now?
The
building.
the Little League
The
still
Little
owns that building. That's
Okay.
I got you, okay. I'm under consideration by the Park Board for a recommendation to move forward with that. We're making sure that, present a decision to the board for whether we take ownership of that or not.
Okay,
So that's in the works?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
okay, well,
Took me a minute.
we need bathrooms up there. If we're gonna put this playground, we need bathrooms up there.
Yeah, but it's
And
important.
those are viable bathrooms that need a little bit refurbished, but they belong to another entity right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was
Okay.
just seeing the status of that.
they vote on that.
I've been
All
on
right.
that for the last 6 months, and
No.
You don't mean the restroom?
Huh?
No, you're saying that the project you're working on right now is trying to get,
Yeah.
not just the restrooms, but just the question about the legality of the whole property?
Right.
Okay, all right.
Well, they won't be going in that stream right there.
Right, gotcha. Okay. All right, Commissioner Goot, we'll
Yeah,
throw it back to
TMI.
council.
I think we haven't voted on item F yet. I think we had a motion and a second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item G, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement between the City of Ashland, Kentucky and Strand Associates, Inc., and retaining Strand to provide engineering services for final design and construction services for the wastewater treatment plant expansion and improvement project in an amount not to exceed $3,992,040.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item H, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky adjusting the compensation for the mayor and city commissioners."
I don't know. I think it's losing.
Oh, so moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item I, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky, amending ordinance number 8, series of 2021, commonly known and referred to as the Alcoholic Beverage Control Ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item F.
We skipped F?
What?
F was skipped.
I thought so.
Oh, okay,
It
all
is
right,
skipped
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. We did skip F. First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky, amending ordinance number 100, series of 2010, as amended by ordinance number 83, series of 2013, which designated 30-minute parking spaces on the west side of 17th Street and on the north side of Korean War Veterans Way, formerly known and referred to as Market Street, in order to create additional 30-minute parking spaces.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And do we do aye?
No.
Okay.
I should have
You got me,
thrown it, I should
Commissioner
have,
Good, you got me all out of
I
it.
know,
should
I
have thrown
know.
it to
I
our
got you out of
clerk, not
whack, I know.
the council.
Exactly. Item I, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky, amending ordinance number 8, series of 2021, commonly known and referred to as the Alcoholic Beverage Control Ordinance.
So moved.
I think we,
We did that
We
one.
did that
I
one.
did that one.
But she-
What the heck?
All right, we do it again.
Let's just make sure we
You were
did
the
that
motion.
one.
You were the second.
and then we
Yes.
did have a
It's
final,
all your
which
fault.
was,
We're
I'm
going back
sorry.
to
I'm sorry.
Item J,
Marty was the first, Josh was the second.
Don't talk about the wee-wee.
item J, reading and adoption of a resolution entitled, Resolution of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing continued participation in the Kentucky Public Employees Deferred Compensation Authority 457 Plan, 401K Plan, and deemed IRA program for the benefit of employees, and authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a joinder agreement between the City of Ashland, Kentucky and the Kentucky Public Employees Deferred Compensation Authority, and any and all other documents related to said plans.
So moved.
Second.
any discussion?
Now we're
All in
back on
favor?
track. Aye.
Yes.
Okay. I think we're ready.
Item K, reading and adoption of a resolution entitled, Resolution of the City of Ashland, Kentucky approving the reallocation of 7 HUD VASH vouchers from the Housing Authority of Pikeville to City of Ashland Assisted Housing to assist homeless veterans within Boyd County, and authorizing and directing the mayor to execute any and all documents to facilitate said relocation.
So moved.
Moved. Second.
Well,
Yeah.
this is important.
Yeah.
And it further shows our city's commitment to doing all we can to not only help our homeless, but our veterans. And I appreciate the efforts and our friends in Pikeville for this, so. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have another number of proposed reappointments. Mayor requests the board's concurrence on the reappointment of Lindy Lohman to the Ashland Tennis Commission for a 3-year term retroactive to October 2nd, 2022, and expiring on October 2nd, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item M, the mayor requests the board's concurrence on the reappointment of Melanie Thompson to the Ashland Tennis Commission for the 3-year term retroactive to October 10, 2022, and expiring on October 10, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item N, the mayor requests the board's concurrence on the reappointment of Clayton Hill to the Ashland Tennis Commission for a 3-year term retroactive to October 10, 2022, and expiring on October 10, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And then item O, the mayor requests the board's concurrence to the appointment of Charles R. Holbrook III to the Ashland Park Board to fill the unexpired term of Judy Gerhardt, expiring on October 18, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Can we have a motion to recess till Monday at 9 a.m.?
Mr. Mayor, I have one other thing.
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion that we allow our city employees to call it a day on Friday, December 23rd at 2 o'clock, so they can spend time with their families, even though Christmas is on the 25th.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Wonderful idea.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, now.
Mayor, may
Oh, okay.
may we motion to recess in memory of Stu?
Absolutely. So we'll make that motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are recessed till Monday, 9 a.m. Does that sound,
And that will be our last
Is
meeting.
that right?
it may be, in Marty, we're never really sure. Till the last ticking of the clock at midnight.
One never knows.
That's right.
That's fine.